Imagine a country whose most recognizable symbol is not a palace, not an ancient fortress, not a royal crown, and not even a battlefield where an empire was born. Imagine a country represented by a woman made of copper, standing alone in the middle of a harbor, facing the ocean, holding a torch high above her head. From a distance, she looks calm and eternal. But inside that green body is a hidden structure of iron and steel, built to survive storms, sea winds, freezing winters, wars, political conflicts, and the endless noise of one of the greatest cities on Earth. And here is the first strange thing about this symbol. The most famous image of the United States was not entirely born in the United States. It was imagined in France, built in France, shipped across the Atlantic Ocean in pieces, assembled in New York Harbor, and then slowly transformed by history into something much larger than its creators could have predicted. This is the Statue of Liberty, and today we are not simply going to talk about a monument. We are going to talk about how a copper statue became one of the most powerful symbols of freedom in human history. The story begins not in New York, but in France. After the American Civil War, many French intellectuals looked at the United States with deep interest. To them, America was not just a young country across the ocean, it was an experiment, a republic built on the idea that ordinary people could govern themselves. One of these men was Édouard de la Boulaye, a French thinker and supporter of democracy. He believed that France should give the United States a gift to celebrate the 100th anniversary of American independence. The idea eventually reached a young sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi. Bartholdi understood that the statue had to be more than decoration. It had to be a message. It had to stand where ships could see it. It had to be large enough to become part of the horizon itself. And so he imagined a woman, not a queen, not a warrior, not a goddess of conquest, but a figure of liberty holding a torch, lighting the way. The official name of the statue was Liberty Enlightening the World. That name matters. It does not say liberty belongs to one country. It says liberty is a light. And light, at least in the ideal version of the story, is meant to travel beyond borders. But turning an idea like this into metal, stone, and reality required more than imagination. It required money. It required engineering. It required faith. And that was where the first problem appeared. The French would raise money to build the statue itself. The Americans would raise money to build the pedestal on which it would stand. It sounded simple, but in reality, both sides struggled. In France, fundraising events were organized. Wealthy citizens donated. Cities donated. Ordinary people donated. Even school children gave small amounts. Piece by piece, the statue began to take shape. In America, however, the pedestal became a serious problem. The work slowed down. Money was missing. The entire project was in danger of becoming an unfinished dream. Then Joseph Pulitzer, the publisher of the New York World newspaper, entered the story. Pulitzer launched a public fundraising campaign. But instead of asking only the rich to save the project, he appealed to ordinary Americans, workers, children, immigrants, shopkeepers, people who could give only a few cents. And it worked. Thousands of small donations helped complete the pedestal. This is one of the most important details in the entire story. The Statue of Liberty is a giant monument, but it was saved by small contributions. Before she ever stood over New York Harbor, she already carried one of America's deepest contradictions. Enormous ideals built by ordinary hands. The statue did not arrive in America as one complete figure. It was taken apart in France, packed into hundreds of crates, loaded onto a French ship, and sent across the Atlantic Ocean. When the ship arrived in New York Harbor in 1885, the city celebrated. Boats filled the water. Crowds gathered. People cheered. But liberty could not stand yet. The pedestal was still not finished. So, for a time, the symbol of freedom lay in wooden boxes. Think about that image. Liberty had arrived in America, but liberty was still waiting to be assembled. In a strange way, this image describes the entire history of the United States. Freedom in America has never arrived fully complete. It has always had to be built, debated, expanded, repaired, defended, and sometimes fought for again from the very people who claimed to protect it. In 1886, workers began assembling the statue on Bedloe's Island, which would later be renamed Liberty Island. Many of the men working on the monument were immigrants themselves. They were building a symbol that would one day welcome people just like them. On October 28, 1886, the Statue of Liberty was officially dedicated. New York held a massive celebration. Ships passed through the harbor. Crowds filled the streets. The city staged one of its earliest ticker tape parades. But there was another detail, less often remembered. Women were largely excluded from the official ceremony, unless accompanied by men. Because of this, women's rights activists rented their own boat and protested from the water. A monument to liberty was being unveiled, but not everyone was allowed to stand equally beneath it. Every part of the statue contains meaning. In her right hand, she holds the torch, the light of freedom. In her left hand, she carries a tablet marked with the date July 4th, 1776, the date of the Declaration of Independence. On her head is a crown with 7 rays, often understood as the light of liberty spreading across the 7 seas and 7 continents. And at her feet are broken chains. The torch is visible to everyone. The crown is visible to everyone. But the broken chains are almost hidden. The light is easy to see. The cost of that light is often hidden below. At first, the Statue of Liberty was not mainly seen as a symbol of immigration, but history placed it in a location that would change its meaning forever. Not far from Liberty Island was Ellis Island, the great immigration station of the United States. For decades, millions of people passed through New York Harbor on their way to a new life in America. For them, the Statue of Liberty was not a sculpture. It was the first sign that the long ocean crossing was almost over. It was the shape of hope rising from the water. Imagine a ship arriving in the harbor on a cold morning. On deck are families from Italy, Ireland, Eastern Europe, Greece, Scandinavia, Syria, and many other places. They carry wooden suitcases, religious objects, family photographs, a few clothes, a little money, and memories they may never fully explain to their children. Some are escaping poverty. Some are escaping violence. Some are running from religious persecution. Some are leaving behind countries where the future has already closed its doors. And as the ship approaches New York, they see her. A giant green woman standing in the harbor, holding light above the water. To them, she does not look like a diplomatic gift from France. She looks like a promise, but the promise was not simple. Ellis Island was a place of hope, but also of fear. Immigrants were examined, questioned, inspected, and judged. Some passed through in a few hours. Some were detained for days. Some were sent back. So the Statue of Liberty has always stood between 2 emotions, hope and anxiety. From far away, she seemed to say, "Come here." But up close, America asked, "Are you allowed to stay?" In 1903, a bronze plaque was added inside the pedestal with a poem by Emma Lazarus called The New Colossus. That poem changed the emotional meaning of the statue forever. After that, the Statue of Liberty was no longer only a symbol of political freedom. It became a symbol of welcome, a symbol of the tired, the poor, the displaced, and the people searching for a second chance. And yet, this meaning also created tension, because America has never fully agreed on whom it should welcome, how many it should welcome, and what freedom should mean when fear enters the conversation. Throughout the 20th century, the statue watched America transform. It saw New York become one of the most important cities on earth It saw steamships disappear and airplanes take over the sky. It saw world wars, economic crises, waves of immigration, civil rights movements, protests, celebrations, and national grief. During the Second World War, the statue's torch was darkened because of wartime blackout rules. But on D-Day, the light flashed in Morse code, sending the letter V for victory. A symbol of freedom had learned to stand in darkness, then signal hope back into the world. But even symbols grow old. After almost a century of standing in salt air and storms, the Statue of Liberty began to suffer serious damage. The iron bars inside were corroding. The metal connections were weakening. The torch had been changed over time and was no longer in its original condition. In the 1980s, the United States began a major restoration. The statue was covered in scaffolding. For a while, the great woman of New York Harbor looked less like an eternal icon and more like a patient undergoing surgery. There is something deeply meaningful about this. Even a symbol of freedom needs maintenance. Freedom is not something a nation builds once and then leaves untouched. If ignored, it rusts from the inside. From far away, it may still look beautiful, but inside, the structure may already be weakening. A country is the same. Today, when visitors arrive on Liberty Island, they often photograph the statue from below. The green copper, the bright sky, the raised torch, the crown against the clouds. But the green color was not the statue's original color. When it was first built, the Statue of Liberty was a reddish-brown copper color. The green surface was created by time. There are also myths about the Statue of Liberty that should be corrected. The first myth is that France simply gave the United States a finished statue as a complete gift. The truth is more complicated. France funded the statue. America had to fund the pedestal. Without the pedestal, the statue could not stand. The second myth is that the statue was always designed primarily as a symbol of immigration. In reality, that meaning developed gradually. History gave the statue a larger emotional mission than its original creators had planned. The third myth is that the Statue of Liberty is a symbol everyone has always agreed on. That is not true either. Over the decades, the statue has become a site of protest, debate, and political action. Different groups have used it to challenge America, criticize America, and demand that America live up to its own words. And that does not weaken the statue. It proves the point. Liberty is not silence. Liberty is the right to argue beneath the symbol of liberty itself. The statue does not stand there to say that America is perfect. It stands there to remind America that it made a promise too large to ignore. Every era sees the statue differently. To immigrants in the early 20th century, she was the doorway to a new life. To soldiers returning from war, she was home. To civil rights activists, she was a question about an unfinished promise. To tourists today, she is one of the most famous landmarks on Earth. To people leaving crisis behind, she may still be an image of hope. And to the United States itself, she is a mirror, a copper mirror more than 90 meters tall, standing in the harbor, reflecting not the face of one person, but the conscience of a nation. The question she asks is simple. Do you still believe in the light you claim to hold? Because freedom is not only a word written in a founding document. It is how a country treats the weak. It is how a society handles disagreement. It is how a nation remembers its past, including the painful parts. It is the ability to admit that ideals can be higher than reality and still continue walking toward them. The Statue of Liberty is not the largest statue in the world. It is not the oldest monument, but few monuments on Earth contain so many layers of meaning. Some countries are represented by kings, some by armies, some by walls, some by temples. But the United States, at least in its most ideal version of itself, chose to be represented by a woman holding a torch toward the sea. She does not move. She does not speak. She does not judge. She simply raises the light, day after day, through fog, storms, wars, crises, celebrations, protests, parades, old ships, modern ferries, and millions of human lives passing beneath her gaze. If one day that torch loses its meaning, it will not be because the copper has aged. It will not be because the iron has weakened. It will be because people have stopped believing in the promise it represents. But for more than 130 years, millions of people have continued to look up at her. They still come to Liberty Island. They still stand beneath her. They still photograph her. They still tell their children that this is how America once introduced itself to the world. Not as an empire, not as a fortress, not as a throne, but as a torch. And perhaps that is why the Statue of Liberty still has power. Because in a world filled with borders, walls, fear, and division, the image of a woman standing in the middle of the sea, holding a light outward toward the unknown, still makes people want to believe that a better place can exist. Not because it is already perfect, but because it is still being built. If this story made you see the Statue of Liberty differently, let us know in the comments. And if you want more stories about how nations, monuments, and people shape history, don't forget to subscribe.